Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Thank you for joining breakout session 2 here on day 3 of Maine Inclusion Conference. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, I'm seeing
Yes.
thumbs up, so I'm going to go ahead. My name is David Sanchez Aguilera, and I'll be moderating today's conversation on entrepreneurship and economic opportunity. So, as we know, small business creation is a critical pathway to economic mobility and regional growth, especially here in Maine, where local ecosystems play such a central role in shaping opportunities. So, today's conversation is focused on how employers, lenders, and support organizations can more effectively foster entrepreneurial development through mentorship, procurement access, and stronger alignment across the business ecosystem. So today we'll be exploring not just what works in theory, but what works in practice. We will discuss where entrepreneurs are facing headwinds and finding traction. And to do that exploration today, we're joined by a very distinguished panel of leaders who each bring a different perspective across that ecosystem here in Maine. So rather than walking through each bio myself, I'll invite our panelists to briefly introduce themselves. So to our panelists, if you could please let us know your role, your work, and your connection to entrepreneurship here in Maine. That would be fantastic. With 30 to 45 seconds being our sweet spot so that we can really dive into the conversation and have plenty of time for that. So let's go, James, Karam, Lisa, and Jay, if possible.
Sure, totally possible.
Great.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. My name is James McKim. I am founder and managing partner currently of an organization called Organizational Ignition, where I work with organizations to help them align people, process, and technology to gain optimal organizational performance. I've written a book that was published in 2020 called The Diversity Factor, Igniting Superior Organizational Performance, that draws on a lot of my experiences as both an employee, leader in international organizations like HP, also starting a couple of companies, one that had a significant presence in Maine. I actually live in Goffstown, New Hampshire, but I do work in all across the country. And as I said, I started a company that had a significant presence in Maine itself. I'm also past president of the Manchester branch of the NAACP, and happy to be here with you all.
Thank you, James.
My name is Kerem Durda. I'm the managing partner and founder of the Indus Fund, which provides microloans to Maine immigrant business owners. I believe it's the first one in the country, and it's been a great success. In the last 25 years, I've been fortunate enough to run, start, and exit 5 to 6 companies in the state of Maine. I've been here for the last 25 years. I'm part of the Maine Angel Investment Community. I've also been on a bunch of for-profit and nonprofit boards, so I have a fairly deep understanding and appreciation of all the support networks that go into creating entrepreneurial businesses. And at the same time, I'm a trustee of the Maine College of Art and Design.
Amazing. Thank you, Karam.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Jones, and I am the founder of Black Travel Maine, but I'm also a serial entrepreneur who has opened several businesses in Maine, including Black Travel Marketing, Leisure Group Tech, which is a software company, and my latest entrepreneurship will be a series of camps, summer camps called ALM Sports and STEAM Camps. I found Maine to be an amazing entrepreneurial ecosystem, and just a great place to start a business. I've owned businesses prior to coming to Maine, but then when I came to Maine, I've been so fortunate to be able to tap into these ecosystems. So I'm excited to be talking about that today. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa.
And my name is Jay Brenchick. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the city of Auburn. But before I get into a little bit about myself, I just want to thank Inclusion Maine for the work that you guys do. You're expanding opportunity, elevating underrepresented voices, and strengthening our workforce, which is essential. And it also dawned on me while everybody's doing their introduction, it's given me the opportunity to meet these other panelists that are all fantastic people who I need to include in my network at some point in time. I've worked in economic development for about 25 years. I've been directly involved with over $300 million worth of economic development projects in direct investment in the communities I've been in, most of that taking place in Virginia and Maine. And that's my intro.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Um, Thank you all for sharing your incredible backgrounds. It's already clear that we have multiple perspectives spanning community and decades of lived entrepreneurial experience here in Maine. So I'm really excited to ground the conversation in that lived experience. So for my first question to the panel, let's start with James and Karim. Can you each share your stories as entrepreneurs and specifically a moment where things maybe almost didn't work out, and what actually got you through the other end of that tough situation?
James, you're first.
I'm first. I get to start us off. Well, my entrepreneurial journey, I think, was probably similar to many people's. I worked for somebody else for many, many years. I started off out of college as a programmer analyst at a small software house. I then went to Digital Equipment Corporation. And after 9 loyal years back in the 90s, there was a reshuffling and right sizing is the term that they wanted us to use back then. I searched for another job, but really couldn't find one. And connected with a friend of mine who actually lived in Warren, Maine at the time, Hugh Magby. And we decided to create our own really consulting practice at that time. So we focused on information technology, which is my background, management, and human resources management. And so that was a great opportunity to use the skills that I had learned in a way that actually felt very freeing because when you're your own boss, you get to set the schedule. Although you also learn very quickly that your customers, your clients, are your boss. So you gain a slightly different appreciation for what it means to please the customer, and also that sometimes, and this was a very difficult lesson to learn, sometimes you have to fire your customer. Sometimes you have to fire your boss, which kind of goes against everything we've heard. We've heard that the customer or client is king, and not necessarily so if you're going to survive. And self-care is really, really, really important because you are it. We ran the company for 10 years. Hugh had a heart attack, so he had to bow out. And so I shut the company down very gracefully. We actually, so if any of you use the Maine State Ferry Service, the folks who run the boats were our employees for the state of Maine. So I had that very interesting experience of being having a contract with the state of Maine, and so many things that could be a whole session in and of itself. But we shut that down. And then I went to work for HP, actually. and worked there for a number of years in learning and development. And uh, before working for HP, though, while I was still actually working with ISRG, our consulting practice, Hugh and I also formed a company called Hawkeye Data Systems. And what we did was working with a couple other folks, actually, namely Jim Mandry, who actually created the Alpha chip. Anyone who's in technology knows the Alpha chip was a real breakthrough in chip technology. We actually patented the first assets tracker. And this was the days of the pager. So we put together a shoebox-sized device that could track an asset anywhere around the globe, which was just unheard of at that time. We actually shrunk it. And there were talk about times when you were almost failed. There were a couple of times when we almost failed. Just the funding piece. We did the funding circuit with investors, with angels, and whatnot, and we couldn't get traction. So what we recognized we needed to do, and Karen will probably talk about this, investors want not just a great idea. They want the people who bring experience and a confidence that this business will succeed. They want a go-to-market strategy and business plan that shows a break-even point of, and I'm curious to hear where Karen thinks this is today, but 18 to 20 months is the break-even threshold that we were working under. So we recognized that we needed to kind of really build a business around this. And so we brought in an experienced CEO, because none of us have been experienced CEOs of a product company. We'd all been services folks. And that's what saved us. Having that senior level experience and expertise about growing a business. And we had taken advantage of associations assistance, and that didn't quite do it. We really needed that person to round out our team to make that happen. We sold the business, and I went back to HP because some friends of mine asked me to join, and I said, okay, why not? It was a fun to kind of get back with folks I'd worked with before, and doing some interesting things in a large company to see that large scale of a business. And I left there in 2018 as chief of staff for the global technical training division. But another kind of right-sizing situation for me, HP decided that I was too old and too expensive because I lived in too expensive a part of the world. So I got the golden package, and am now doing what I left in 2018 doing, working with organizations, serving on a number of boards, trying to give back some of the knowledge that I've gained to help organizations to be their best. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it.
I'm gonna go from where James was kind enough to hand the baton. I mean, I suspect my story is very similar. It is indeed similar to James's, but it's similar to, I would say, most immigrant entrepreneur stories, where it's a combination of luck and fortitude, mentors, a fair amount of hustle, a fair amount of not knowing things, and just sort of trying to navigate life. My career started in New Hampshire. I joined a young company when I was still in graduate school. I come from a deep liberal arts and engineering background, undergraduate in Minnesota, and then grad studies in UNH. So I was doing actually my PhD in mechanical engineering, and I ended up joining this young company, which ended up going on the public markets twice. and I was the head of the engineering division. Enormously blessed by the gods. To this day, I have the most immense warmth and appreciation for that luck. And I still keep in touch with the CEO who hired me, with the people I work with. But my story is one of zillions, millions, where you want to be able to actualize a life and a dream that you think you have in a place where you think you can be reborn. So I was born and raised in Pakistan of Turkish parents. I came to the US when I was 17 and a half. And, the idea of being an entrepreneur is a latent DNA thing that exists in all of us. But I suspect with immigrants like myself, it's a catalyst to try to be someone that you always thought you deserve to be, and you deserve to be heard and seen. And this is in the early 90s where those lucky molecules came in place, and I became into this environment where I saw what it means to create something, and especially what it means to create something that lives the test of time. And I'm enormously passionate about that. I'm not interested in creating things that are only for the turn of the next 18 months or 24 months or 36 months. I'm interested in having things live beyond me for 10, 20, 30 years. And I think that's where it started, was creating these machines. We were in the printed circuit board manufacturing automation business, and machines are still out there. And from there, I became chief technical officer for a US subsidiary of a very large German semiconductor company. And that's where the world opened up. And my wife and her family is from South Portland, so we always wanted to move back to Maine, and just so happened that this company purchased a company in Maine. And I came with that team. And my life changed again. And I think that's the story of entrepreneurship, where your life changes again and again and again. And you have to sort of navigate the rivers of life. And as James said, the idea of getting to break even, I think, is enormously important. And I think in today's world, I would even challenge myself that the idea of break even cash is enormously important on day one. Those days where you say, I'm going to have a profitable business 2 years down the road, and you need to give me money to do that, I think are way, 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 way behind us. But nevertheless, I think those are lessons learned. And when I settled into Maine, the idea of entrepreneurship, startups, investors, minimal viable products, all those things in 1999, 2000 was a vocabulary that didn't exist. And now look at us, 26 years on, thanks to Hamza and Inclusion Maine, we're all here talking about these things as if we've always had them. Whether it's the Maine Technology Institute, Maine Venture Fund, CEI, and these were organizations that were embryonic when I was here. I literally had a startup after I left the German company. I was one of 3 startups in the state of Maine sitting across 2 angel investors in 1999. And look at us now. There's an own ecosystem. There's a massive community, right? And I think thinking in terms of the long term, I think helps me, because I think we're part of a community. And whether it's the startup I created, in the early 2000s that I exited, selling it to a public company, and then 3 other startups since then, which we exited and all that stuff. The idea of failure, I think, is an important one. It's not that I've come close to failure. I've failed. And I think that's okay, right? And there are various degrees of what constitutes failure. It could be you drove the business into the ground. It could be that you had to lay off people because you couldn't keep up. Or it was because you had a blind spot to macro trends that completely cleaned your clock. All of those happened to me. But then you have those successes where the success of the company establishes itself on a generational basis, on a community basis, and on a basis of being good. And in the last 12 to 14 years, that's something I've devoted my life to, which is what makes a company be good? What is essential to its responsibilities to its employees, vendors, community, the planet, and also indeed to shareholders and stakeholders? We all have participants in the adventure. It's not a zero-sum game. It's certainly not one that requires ego. It requires one collaboration and servant leadership. And I'm enormously proud that I somehow have figured out how to dance around the idea of chaos, confusion, enormous amounts of data, and dance around those little molecules that come at you at enormous velocity with the team that I want to be with. And I think that's important. You navigate failure because you're surrounded by love and grace and by the support of the people that believe that the adventure you're on is actually worth something and gives meaning to each other. And by giving meaning to each other, you give meaning to the community around you. I do strongly believe to my core, to my absolute core, that in the 21st century, the way to be able to actualize and push against monopolistic tendencies and oligarchic tendencies is community. And small businesses are indeed the firewall to that. Make no mistake about it. The GDP of Maine is $78 billion, give or take. There's about 160,000 businesses in the state of Maine. Out of the 160,000 businesses in the state of Maine, 77 to 79% of them are employee base of 20 or less. So about 80% of the GDP of Maine, 60% in the country itself, is driven by small businesses. And that creates the economic wealth we participate in. As an immigrant over here, every day I try to remind myself of the grace that I've been awarded because of that wealth, because of that velocity, because of the processes that exist, the democracy that exists, the legal structures that exist. Small businesses allow our kids to go to school. They allow us to be connected to each other. They allow us to be like this with each other. They allow us to access life. So my urging to the panel and to everybody in the community is revel in the success that you're part of. Celebrate that you are here as a small business or a part of a small business. Do cartwheels that you belong to something and somebody that will live on. Clap yourselves and sing songs and dance around because you have survived. And every day you believe in doing things that are not zero sum. Every day you do things that allow you to grow, not just as a human being, but as a community. Every day you do things which allow us not to exercise power at disproportionate levels and level people around us. And I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about business power. I'm talking about asymmetric power that exists. Small businesses fight against that. They do. You buy from each other, you coordinate with each other, you commune with each other. And I think that's how you navigate failure. Failure will come and go. We'll get our clocks clean every so often, and that's okay. But then there are moments where you say to yourself, I'm part of a team and I'm going to go. And you go, and you laugh, and you sing, and you make it happen. So my encouragement to everybody is, you are the beholder of the flame. You create the flame. Hold it. Hold it high. Right? Don't let it snuff out. And keep going. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that perspective. I think that was the pep talk that we all needed today on this Friday morning. So I've really just loved hearing both of your personal stories and how it underscores how resilience is about relationships and community and timing. So that was beautiful. Thank you both. So, following that, I want to zoom out a little bit from that individual experience to some of the broader ecosystem resources that you both have hit on. So my next question for Jay and Lisa is, picking up where these two have left off, Maine has several resources, Maine Angels, Score Maine, Fame, MTI, Startup Maine, just to name a few. And we already heard how we shouldn't take that for granted since, these were embryonic, to use the word Karim used, just a few decades ago, right? So, or years ago. So, how are these resources being leveraged well? And where in the ecosystem are they breaking down for entrepreneurs today from your perspectives?
You want to go first, Lisa, or?
Yeah, I guess I can start and give you some background on my experience and then let you back it up with, I think Maine has been amazing. I came from New York and I didn't know there were resources for entrepreneurs until I got to Maine. I was already an entrepreneur in New York, but I did not realize that there are programs such as MTI, Dirigo Labs, Maine Center for Entrepreneurs. And so I was introduced to the first program when I got here. I just really, I don't know if anyone knows the story, but I really just started posting pictures of myself and my daughter in Maine having a good time. I had a travel background of over 20 years and in my own business. And when I got here, I was invited to Maine during COVID, and all I knew about Maine was lobster. I did not know Maine was vacation land. So when I got here and I started driving around and going to the beaches and going to the lakes, I'm like, OMG, I travel all over the world to see beautiful destinations like this in Europe and all these places where I've had to jump on planes to see this natural beauty. And here it is right here in Maine. So for me, it's like I started posting these pictures and videos, and a friend said to me, you know, came home and said, there's a program that's being started at a Colby College called Dirigo Labs. Do you think you could pitch this? Would this, what you're doing in Maine be? And I'm like, no way. And then I started digging into Dirigo Labs. And the next thing I know, I applied and I became part of this accelerator. And no way did I think they would be interested in anything called Black Travel Maine. Like, it was really just, I saw a missing piece of tourism. I knew that there were plenty of black and brown people like me who had money to travel and be on vacation, but why didn't they know Maine was an option? And so that's how it really got started. And I have to say, if it wasn't for Dirigo Labs, Susan Rulin and that team, Garvin, that saw the vision for what I had and gave me an opportunity in that program. Then from there, I went into Maine Center for Entrepreneurs not long after. I feel like the way I did it was kind of good too because I went north in Maine first and then came south. Maine Center for Entrepreneurs is more south. So I made a lot of relationships through Dirigo Labs that then MCE helped connect those final dots in southern Maine. So I have to tell you that I'm just blown away by the ecosystem that's here and how much it's helped me to get to where I'm at right now. And I just want to say that I didn't see any of these programs or hear about any programs like this in other states. So Maine, in fact, I was part of the governor, one of the campaigns in New York, and they were talking about bringing in starting an incubator and not an accelerator. And I thought to myself, an incubator, you're way behind where Maine is. How is Maine ahead of New York? So I say that to say Maine has a lot of really good resources. And I'm here to tell you that they work. I mean, they've helped me rebuild websites, they've helped me launch the software. That was the other piece to my travel company. I had proprietary software that I developed that I didn't realize that it was proprietary. When you're doing stuff, you just do stuff as an entrepreneur. I need to get this done for my business. How do I get it done? Hired a coder and we just wrote this software and it's called Leisure Group Tech and actually it's being commercialized here in Maine and it'll eventually be something that other people will be able to buy into. So I would say that the resources here are amazing. I'm living proof that they work and that it sets you up in an ecosystem and as community. Um, he's so right on that. Community is what I feel is what Maine does really well in their entrepreneur ecosystem. So I'll let you take it from there, Jay. Thank you.
Sure. I can offer sort of a global perspective on resources in Maine and how I've seen those leveraged. I've been an entrepreneur, but never have I been an entrepreneur in Maine. My role as a director of economic development is to make sure that my businesses in my community are leveraging all of those resources. And so what I found is when people like Lisa are entrepreneurs who know how to navigate the system, then these resources are incredibly powerful. So, for example, I was originally contacted by a woman named Melissa LaCase, and she had a startup company called Tanbark. She was looking for a manufacturing space, and I was doing a search for her here in Auburn. Um, as it turned out, we just had nothing that was going to help her. But as I was working with her, I learned more about her business and more about what she was trying to do. And that information helped me get her started on navigating our ecosystem and all of the resources out there. So Tanbark actually uses recycled materials to create biodegradable packaging for like the food industry. So we've got a ton of plastics out there, and they're helping us get away from that. Well, she doesn't need the Chamber of Commerce. What she does need is the University of Maine Center for Advanced Manufacturing. She needs to be mentored through the programs at the Rue Institute, and she needs funding and resources that align with what she's trying to accomplish. So um, I I love to tell the story, but I really have not been hugely involved with her success. I just helped her get started. So I made sure to give her the introduction to the Center for Advanced Manufacturing, to the Rue Institute, and to Maine Technology Institute and some of those. And so then what I saw her do was go ahead and do the things like it sounds like Lisa had done and navigate her way through that system. And people along the way helped her navigate her way. So she actually joined their founder program at the Rue Institute, which then gave her some mentors who worked in similar industries to her. Um, and through the Rue Institute, they were able to help her with things, but then she went back to the Center for Advanced Manufacturing with the University of Maine to help get her floor plan and her machinery and tools set up. And then in order to be able to do that, she needed funding, and the right organization to help her get that funding, it was the Maine Technology Institute, because they do innovation funding. And once she got that, she was able to, work then with organizations like FAME, Finance Authority of Maine, to help her secure like the loans and the guarantees, and so that she could start to hire employees and get started. And so when this pipeline works, it works beautifully. It's amazing. Um, but sometimes where I see the ecosystem break down here in Maine, some people will say that the challenge is awareness. Others will say it's access, and some will say it's alignment. And what I'll tell you is it's all three. Um, it's great to hear Lisa talk about how she's worked her way through the system. So she had two things that happened. She had some people within that system who I'm sure kind of helped guide her and tell her, you know what, you should go talk to these other people. We've helped you the way we can. But it also sounds like she, on her own, did a lot of research and started looking into stuff and had that curious mind that you have to have and that desire to keep digging and digging and digging. So really one of the biggest issues, I think, is really awareness. When you talk to people and entrepreneurs who are being successful, they're plugged in and they're aware of all of these organizations. When you talk to entrepreneurs or really somebody who started a business and it wasn't successful, it was because they weren't aware of all of these resources around them. And so uh, the state of Maine has done an amazing job of creating all of these resources. What we haven't done a great job of is making our general population and citizens in the rest of the country aware of what we've done. Um, Great example. I keep going back to Lisa, but Lisa came from New York. I think of New York and I think, wow, they got everything. They're innovative, they're this, they're that. That's not the case, but it's what comes to mind. And so you think of those, you've got different states, California, I think of that. Maine never comes into that equation. And that's where I think, a lot of these organizations, as well as the state, could do more to partner and collaborate. Right now, we do a great job of partnering and collaborating on a one-off basis. Let's help Lisa get through this. Let's help so-and-so get through this. But really what I'd like to see is, from the state level or like the Maine Center for Entrepreneurship is actually a separate organization. They're not part of the Department of Economic and Community Development. They're a separate. Maine Technology Institute and Maine Center for International Trade, they are part of that. But if those three organizations as well as the state came together to leverage their resources to then create more of an awareness marketing campaign around what all of the resources are, then we'd have that awareness. And that would then help resolve a lot of the issue of access to these resources. And then when people are more aware of all of the different resources, that helps with the alignment. That helps with people not just working with MTI as a silo, or working with um, different organizations. And, that's where, the biggest area, I think if I start to think of entrepreneurs and, where they start falling through the cracks, it's really in the financing side of things. It's extremely difficult. It's if you've never been an entrepreneur, you might not understand this, but if you've ever been new to the workforce, you understand this. When you first get out of high school or get out of college, everybody wants you to have experience. Well, you can't have experience unless somebody gives you the opportunity for the job. And so when you go seeking financing, people want you to have things like working capital. They want you to already have a cash flow. They want you to have all these different things, which you certainly don't have. And then the biggest kind of crack, or what I see, is the working capital and growth stage financing. There's a decent support for the startups and the micro businesses, but once a business exceeds the $250,000 to $2 million, or once they need to scale to that amount, the options for them narrow dramatically. Banks are afraid to work with them. Venture capital is relatively limited. and they don't have the collateral. Uh, and that's where I see entrepreneurs and small businesses and companies. That's where they plateau.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. So if I can, I'm raising my hand because he's spot on with what you're saying, because that is where I'm at. I don't have an office. I don't have space yet. There's so many things like I'm there, but getting over that next hurdle of scale up is where I feel there's a plateau, as you described.
No. Yeah. So, I think in the interest, we've got like 15 minutes left. Uh, we could probably go on to other questions, because I think Lisa and I could talk about this one thing the rest of the day, and still not solve it. But what I do see is, if we can start with an awareness campaign, once you make more and more people aware of things, that's when solutions start to come in. And so the awareness campaign and awareness, um, to help entrepreneurs get past the stage where Lisa is what we need to do. And then in doing that, we're going to find there aren't a lot of resources, and then therefore we'll start to have organizations and individuals step up to start to bridge that gap. But right now, it's pretty limited.
Yeah, thank you, Jay, so much for that perspective. And Lisa, for raising your hand to kind of identify that gap right now. And that really leads into the next question, which actually is about scaling. So I think that I would love to bring James and Karen back into this. What are some of the missing components that main businesses sometimes um, don't have, that prevent them from scaling to that 10 to 20 to 50 employee kind of trajectory, of course, depending on what their business and goals are. So, would love to turn it back, bring some different perspectives on that question of scaling.
Well, I went first, Karam, so I'll let you go first this time. You're on mute.
Thank you very much, James. I suspect you and I are on the same wavelength here. I would just highlight three things that are a hurdle and at the same time an opportunity, at least for growing businesses in Maine. One is the capacity and expertise to have actually good governance. When I say governance, is your board of directors capable, expertise driven? Do they understand how they can help you navigate? In the state of Maine, that is a pretty weak layer right now that exists. So the entrepreneurs feel alone. They're trying to navigate 3,000 things at the same time, and they don't really have a board that can help them do that. And a board is not something that just exists to just meet for chocolate chip cookies every quarter. It's every month, tracking, monitoring, reporting, helping, right? Those are some, that's a weak gap in the state of Maine, and I think that needs to be addressed. The good news is that there's a lot of resources that can be brought into that. We have 4 large mentor corps actually in the state of Maine, between SCORE and what MCE has, what the University of Maine has, and what MTI has. But I think we need to institutionalize it, professionalize it, incentivize it, and pay for it. That's one. The second thing is there is actually a lot of expertise that exists in the state of Maine. It just needs to be deployed in an efficient manner. There's like 250 economic development agencies in the state of Maine. There's an alphabet soup that we've barely touched on over here. There's a lot that goes on a discretized basis. That's a lot of expertise, but it's very diffused. It needs to be centralized, institutionalized. There needs to be a gravitational sun that allows this thing to be able to be focused. And then that expertise, there are a lot of professionals in the state of Maine that are going through various stages of their career. They're going through various stages of their growth. They like to help. And they like to help in ways that allow the entrepreneur to grow. But those touch points either are too diffuse, they can't find it, or they're not interested because nobody's reached out to them. And the third thing is the capital. Yes, that gap and that step function in the state of Maine where you have growth capital after the seed capital exists. It's not something that's going to get resolved by incrementalism. It needs to get resolved through some bravery, actually. So, for example, in the state of Maine, the legislature voted to actually give out $300 to every Mainer there is. It's about $250 million. That to me is a lost opportunity, because if that $250 million was levered with some private funding and made $1 billion fund, now you can have some risk capital and you can have some low-term interest rates for businesses that can access it, right? So how do we use taxpayer money, or how do we lever private money to be able to create a large pool of funds that can be essentially brought to bear? The challenge is not just necessarily that large capital stacks don't exist in the state of Maine. The challenge is also cultural. Mm-hmm. How many of our entrepreneurs that are in the state of Maine are willing to go to New York or Boston or Chicago, Minneapolis, Miami, Los Angeles, San Francisco to pool money? It's cultural. We need to be able to sort of get beyond ourselves a little bit and say it's okay for us to toot our own horns and externalize ourselves and our stories. It's okay to invite other people, other structures, other entities in to be able to have a conversation about funding our businesses. Because you can't just do it organically. It just will not happen. You need to be able to bring in different input points. So I'll hand it over to James.
Well, you're right. We're on the same wavelength. I was going to say, Jay hit it on the head with the finance piece, and you talked about that, Karam. The leadership piece also, I think, is really important in that notion of a board. And I look at a board as a set of trusted advisors. We hear about a board and it feels like this formal thing, right? And if you approach it as, well, there's some people I know or that I can have in my network who have different levels of expertise, different areas of expertise. We look for a diverse board, not just people who are going to be the same background and a yes board, right? But I have people who are generally interested in my idea and in me being successful, right? That's your board. That's your set of advisors. A couple of things I wanted to add, though. One, what I see is missing in a lot of entrepreneurs, because a lot of entrepreneurs have the technical expertise. They have the technical idea, right? And in Lisa's case, her idea was not technical in the sense of technology, but the product, right? That's generally where the entrepreneur is. The entrepreneur has that idea about the product, but not about creating and running a business. And particularly, and Karam, you mentioned this, we don't toot our own horns. Entrepreneurs are not good at marketing, right? And to scale, you really do have to have the marketing. You have to have the customer base so you can get the funding, as we've been talking about, that will help you to grow and scale. And that's also related to the last point I wanted to make about risk. Karen mentioned we're not willing to go out to other places in the country, and the finance challenge is the same in other places around the country. It's not different in Maine, right? It's that same challenge. But this notion that if we've had the technical expertise, we've figured things out, and we're not risk takers. Mm-hmm. And with entrepreneurship, you have to be a risk taker. People don't like that, but they also don't understand that there is a whole practice around risk management. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you learn about risk management, and I'm a project management professional, I'm licensed, there's a whole discipline, there's a whole certification in risk management. If you manage your risk, it's not so scary after all. We feel like we want to do things over which we have control. Well, risk management lets you have control over things that you didn't think you had control over, which makes you want to go out. It makes you confident enough to go out and talk to people about your idea, right? So those are a few thoughts I have that kind of play off of what we've been talking about, and maybe hopefully add a few more thoughts for folks.
Thank you, James. I think that both of your perspectives were very enlightening. Just getting that kind of role about, understanding the board as that strategic, trusted advisor kind of collective, talking about how we sometimes need to break out of our silos. And then that risk management as something that you can actually manage is all really um, helpful data points for an entrepreneur. So thank you both so much. So we have 9 minutes left. And with that, I want to turn to mentorship, which was something that was just mentioned. So, Lisa and James and Jay, I'm curious, in the 8 minutes we have left, where have you seen, let's see, why do you think mentorship is not more widely accessed? And how can we kind of improve that?
I'll go first, and in the interest of time, I've got a lot to say about this, but I'll cut since this is a conference with Inclusion Maine, and we're talking about underrepresented populations. Well, underrepresented populations where our represented entrepreneurs come from, and those people lack access to networks where mentorship naturally happens. And so I'll give an extreme example. If you grow up in an extremely wealthy neighborhood and your parents have different businesses and things like that, you're surrounded by mentorship, whether you know it or not. Um, if you're in a situation where it's an underrepresented population, there hasn't been a lot of opportunity, and that, then you're surrounded by people who are also trying to figure out how to navigate and get through. There's an issue there for the people that Inclusion Maine try to serve, which is that real lack of natural mentorship. And there's other things too, but I'll keep it at that. And then the other thing is underused or less effective is that we treat mentorship as though it's a bonus or an extra thing to do when it's actually the core part of your business. The mentorships which needs to almost come, well, it's from day one. So a lot of people will start a business or get along in their career and then say, well, now I got to find a mentor. You should be finding almost like micro mentors as you move along in whether it's your career because you're not an entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur. And so I'll keep it at that because we're down to like 6 minutes.
Perfect.
Well, I'm actually glad that we're talking about mentorship because I feel like mentorship is one of the most important parts, as you said. Finding that right mentor, but again, getting into the ecosystem so that you can get to that mentor. I can't help but think about the mentor that I received from the Maine Center of Entrepreneurs, Andrew Geary. Systems. I never realized how important systems were. And, sometimes as an entrepreneur, we're just doing. And I have to tell you, the biggest thing I learned in Maine Center of Entrepreneurs was systems and how important that was. And I think the other thing we didn't talk about that needs to be touched on a little is the gatekeeping that goes on in Maine. I think there's a lot of gatekeeping that prevents people from getting into those ecosystems. And I think that's something that needs to be broken down. And I don't know how Maine breaks that down, who deems who's worthy, and how those decisions are made. But I've experienced a whole lot of gatekeeping here, and I've been able to navigate it, but not everybody can navigate it. So I'm here to tell you that I feel like that's also a big. So I think that's where when you say the marketing of these groups and these programs that are out here, but I also think getting access to those groups is not always easy for everyone. And I'll leave that right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can just add a couple of thoughts. what I see for a number of entrepreneurs, particularly those who are kind of new to the country, for example, there's this fear of asking for help. And we need to get folks over that fear for asking for help. And thinking that mentorship is a handout rather than a hand up, as the saying goes, right? The other thing I just mention is that the successful mentor programs match mentor with mentee. And what I mean by that is people who need mentoring have strengths and they have weaknesses. And they have a certain perspective on life. So first of all, a mentor needs to have the expertise in the area that the mentee needs, right? And it's more than just the technical area, which entrepreneurs generally have the strength in already, right? So match yourself with a mentor who's expert in marketing if you're not an expert in marketing, or if you need help with marketing, right? Have a mentor in finance if you're not so strong on finance. But the other piece to successful mentoring is mentors have to be prepared to be mentors, right? It's not just you become a mentor of someone and that's it. You're engaged, you're connected, right? Mentors have to have training and understand that it's not just the technical knowledge that needs to be imparted, but it's also understanding how the mentee thinks. Understand and be able to empathize with what the mentee is going through, right? So we're talking about inclusion. A white person's not necessarily going to understand an immigrant's background and how they think. So there's some ways that white mentor is not going to be able to help that mentee. There are other ways where they will be able to help, but not in every way. So and I guess thinking about it from the mentee's perspective, when you look for a mentor, ask questions about how they see the world, not just about what expertise they have. Right? And so the best matches really take the mentee as an entire person into consideration, not just, oh, I have this one area that I need some help with.
Yeah. Well, thank you, James and Lisa, for your insights there. What's unbelievable is that it's already been an hour, and it feels like we just started just a second ago, which just speaks to the strength of our panel today. So I really want to thank you for being here and just sharing your incredible wisdom, and Inclusion Maine for making this conversation possible. So just to close out, reflecting on entrepreneurship, pointing out all of the resources that our panelists today have pointed out, pointing out the roles of finding those resources, finding those mentors, and thinking about, the different components. And I'm thinking there about the board, thinking there about the risk management piece as well. So many incredible nuggets have come out of this. So just want to thank all of you for what you've given today. It was a very good conversation.
Thank you for having us. Very kind of you.
Thank you. Great to be with you all.
It was great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.